You know, back in early 2026, when that major conflict kicked off, the whole world was, of course, watching the front lines. But something just as profound was happening way behind the scenes, in the classroom. So today, let's dive into how this one war is completely reshaping the future of medicine.
And look, this isn't just about a temporary need for more battlefield medics. Not at all. What we're breaking down here shows how a single conflict is sending these massive ripple effects through the entire system, changing everything from 2-year diplomas all the way up to PhD research. And it's happening all over the globe.
So to really get our heads around this, we have to look at what the research calls the war's impact framework. Think of it like a push and a pull happening at the same time. On one side, you've got this crisis surge, this sudden, almost desperate demand for very specific skills. And on the other, there's a cautionary pause, where all the instability makes people kind of pump the brakes and rethink their long-term plans. This idea, this framework, it's the key to understanding everything else we're about to talk about.
All right, let's start with the most immediate impact. We're talking about the skills needed on the ground, like right now. This is where that crisis surge is just impossible to miss.
It's such a critical question to ask, right? When the usual systems just completely break down, the need for healthcare doesn't just get bigger. It becomes laser-focused on a handful of life-saving skills. So, what are they?
Okay, so what's so fascinating here is how this all breaks down. Of course, you see the skills you'd expect. EMT and trauma care, absolutely essential for civilians. Then you've got the super specialized stuff, like battlefield medicine, for working in really tough environments. But look at that last one, medical supply chain management. That's the one that may surprise you. In a war zone, just getting bandages and medicine from point A to point B becomes this incredibly specialized life-or-death skill. And organizations like Doctors Without Borders and the ICRC, they are desperate for people with that expertise.
And this right here just perfectly illustrates the entire shift. Before, vocational medical training was all about routine care in stable, predictable hospitals. Now, the whole game has changed. The focus is on crisis response, on knowing how to improvise, how to manage total chaos, and how to work in these intense, high-stakes situations where you have almost no resources. It's a completely different mindset.
Okay, so let's zoom out a bit from that immediate, hands-on training. What about the people in the longer, core medical degree programs? Well, this is where the story gets a lot more complicated. The student body itself is actually splitting in 2 different directions because of the conflict.
And right here is where you can really see that push and pull effect we were talking about. So on one side, you have this mobilization trend. These are students in nursing or PA programs who are now actively choosing to train for jobs in crisis zones or military healthcare. They're moving towards the problem. But on the other side, you've got the safety shift. These are international students who are studying in what are now unstable regions, and they're basically fleeing to safer countries to finish their education.
Now, get this. This might be one of the most unexpected findings of all. The war isn't just being fought on the ground. State-sponsored hackers are increasingly targeting hospital infrastructure. We're talking cyber attacks. And because of that, the demand for healthcare managers who actually understand cybersecurity has just gone through the roof. The new front line, it isn't just in a field hospital, it's in the data center.
This slide really just paints a perfect picture of that safety shift we were just talking about. I mean, this is a mass migration of talent. You have students leaving these very established educational hubs, and they're not just looking for physical safety. They need educational stability to finish their degrees. And this is creating brand new hotspots for medical education in places like Malaysia, Australia, and Western Europe, countries that are seen as both safe and having really high-quality programs.
All right, so we've looked at the immediate needs and the shifts in degree programs, but what about the long game? Let's talk about the future, because this conflict is fundamentally changing the entire direction of medical research.
So in the world of medical PhDs, there's a new buzzword everyone's talking about: dual use. What this means is that governments are now pouring money into research that works for both civilian public health and for national security. We're seeing this massive surge in things like biodefense, creating vaccines super fast, and even developing AI that can diagnose injuries on the battlefield. The big takeaway here is that top-level medical research and national defense are now becoming deeply, deeply connected.
And you know, behind all of these big strategic shifts, there's a very real human cost. The conflict has already displaced hundreds of thousands of people. And that's not just some abstract statistic. That number represents a massive, long-term mental health crisis that's brewing. And that is exactly why we're seeing this huge projected need for PhDs who specialize in PTSD and displacement trauma. So, we've gone through diplomas, degrees, and PhDs. What does it all add up to? Let's try to pull all these threads together and see what this new blueprint for healthcare actually looks like.
This table right here, it just sums up the entire story beautifully. I mean, just take a second to look it over. Down at the diploma level, demand is absolutely increasing for those frontline skills. You move up to degrees, and the overall number of students is kind of stable, but it's shifting, and shifting hard towards crisis-ready pros and people who get cybersecurity. And then, at the top, the PhD level, a strong increase, all driven by those new national security priorities. The bottom line is, the entire system is tilting. It's tilting towards resilience and crisis response.
And all of this leaves us with one last really big question. This conflict has shown us just how fragile, but also how surprisingly adaptable our medical education system can be. It's a pretty stark reminder that the way we train our most vital professionals, well, it has to be as dynamic and as unpredictable as the world we live in. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other critical systems are about to face their own version of this test?